Welcome to this week's edition of the Beacon of Light podcast. Now, you all will notice that I am not in my office today. I'm going to set this up. Well, first of all, as you can clearly see, we are, this is Joe Hebblin. I said that name correctly. But I'm just going to set up how this came to be real quick, right? And then we're going to talk about all these letters after your name. As you all know, I have been on this quest to talk about the importance of our diets and, what are we putting down our throats? And I am convinced, you've heard this saying that we are what we eat. I'm convinced that is actually a fact. Now, recently, you all watched the podcast I did with Mike Lewis. He was the doctor that at one point when he was a colonel in the Army, he was the doctor for the Pentagon. And the story goes that Joe and Mike, a couple of doctor scientists, really smart guys, were sitting around questioning certain things. We're going to talk about those questions that you and Mike posed. But I'm just going to, he's given me his card. I know what an MD is. I do not know what a CAPT is, and I do not know what the USPHS stands for. So, you're retired. Where did you retire from?
Well, first of all, thank you, Tony, for giving me this opportunity to speak with you and speak with your followers, because these are terribly important questions that we're asking that have very broad public health implications for terrible mental illnesses. To answer your question specifically about all the letters behind my name. So I'm an MD and board certified in neurology and psychiatry. That's the ACNP credentials, and have practiced psychiatry. I am also a retired captain in the United States Public Health Service. And the United States Public Health Service is charged with protecting the health of the country, and it's part of Health and Human Services. In my capacity as a captain of the Public Health Service, I was a clinical and biochemical investigator inside in the intramural program of the National Institutes of Health, and specifically the National Institute of Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism, where I worked for 30 years and was one of the foundational pioneers in asking this question that you addressed as to what are the implications of what we eat to our brains and our mental health. And I'm still investigating that question.
And I just need to chime in. If you hear the lawnmower, I'm in Joe's home, right? And Joe's neighbor is mowing the grass, and due to time constraints for both of us, we're just going to forge forward, and hopefully he'll be done, mowing his lawn soon.
Well, life goes on, doesn't it?
It does. In order for us to get into what this is, I'm going to share a scenario that I've done in the past, right? That I know you're going to appreciate, and I purposely, Joe and I have talked about, okay, what are we going to talk about last night, and I didn't tell you this part. The cheese puff story.
Cheese puff story.
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
I'm ready.
I'm in my office. It's 3-ish in the afternoon. I have not eaten all day. And over yonder is a bag of cheese puffs. My brain is telling me, don't. But my gut is telling me, you're hungry. And those are so good. The red dyes that are in there. I mean, there's all kinds of not good stuff for you in cheese puffs. So I commence. I talked myself into eating those cheese puffs. Mm-hmm. I did not finish the bag of. This is on an empty stomach. Let's just make a problem worse. I didn't finish the cheese puffs. And a third of the way through that bag, I knew I was in trouble. And now all I can do is hold on because my day is ruined. I don't like what I'm feeling here. I damn sure don't like what I'm feeling here and what I'm feeling here. Here we go. Now, I now know from personal experience, what I consume directly affects what's happening here, right? Now, your position when you're talking with Mike Lewis, let's go to the question that you guys are posing to each other, right? Hope I say this the right way, and if I don't, okay. You and Mike are sitting somewhere, doesn't matter where. I believe it's you that say to Mike, golly gee, I wish that I had some blood that I could analyze of people before they've killed themselves. So now, being a medic in the Army, what happens when somebody comes to the emergency room? We always attempt and oftentimes gather blood from these people. These military active members that have committed suicide, you now have, with Mike's influence, when he worked at the Pentagon or wherever it is that he worked, you have access to hundreds, if not thousands, of vials of blood of members of the active duty military that, in fact, actually were successful in ending their lives. Because you wanted to figure out if there was a discrepancy between the levels of omega-3s and omega-6s. Am I on point so far?
On point so far.
So you now get access to this blood. Lots of it. And you and Mike, you and your team, somebody commences to analyzing in whatever capacity this blood that was on a human being that was in fact alive at the time. Correct?
Correct. Prospectively collected. Because the U.S. military not only collects blood in emergency rooms, they collect and store blood at baseline for every person who's on active duty.
When we come into the military.
When they come into the military and at other time points. So
now,
of those millions, we identified 800 who later died of suicide.
Okay.
And then matched by age, sex, and other variables, 800 controls who did not commit suicide, and asked, is there a question in the levels of omega-3s and omega-6 fatty acids?
I didn't know that part.
Comparing those that died of suicide and those that didn't.
If I'm understanding what you're saying to me and us, you did 800 of people that actually ended up committing suicide, and another 800 of people that didn't commit suicide.
Right.
Matched. What was your finding? Well, first of all, I don't know how important it is, or is it important to discuss what was the method by which you tested this blood to come to the outcome that you came, because you came up with a pretty significant difference between the threes, elevated sixes, and low levels of threes.
Right.
I mean, is it important to discuss how you came to that, or that you did come to that?
Well, we can discuss analytical methods later, but that's
Okay.
not what's really important here.
No.
So this is an observational trial, which we reported that the greater risk of suicide was in those people who had the lowest levels of omega-3 fatty acids. So there was a dose response. Lower levels of omega-3 fatty acids were correlated to higher risks of suicide.
Did you find in the 800 that you tested that didn't commit suicide, right? Did they also have low levels of omega-3s, even though they might not have given any,
Oh, well, some did and some didn't. It's always a natural distribution.
Yeah. Okay.
There's a mean, and then, a standard deviation above and a standard deviation below.
Okay.
And those means and standard deviations were different.
Okay.
In those that, so it could mean that if you were predisposed to to suicide, you simply ate less fish, or it could be that eating less fish was a factor that caused an increased risk of suicide. So what we also did beyond that study, which is an observational study, we did a trial, a clinical trial in England. Malcolm Garland did this, giving people who came to an emergency room for a suicidal attempt, giving them either omega-3 fatty acids or a placebo. And in that trial, which controlled one variable, those taking the omega-3 fatty acids have substantially less depression, less psychiatric problems, and less thoughts of suicide, less risk of suicide, and an increase in happiness.
So that brings me to a little sidebar, right? Of course, this is the Beacon of Light podcast, but this is, I don't know, a subsidiary, a sister company, and was put in place from Beacon Recovery, the outpatient facility that I currently own. And we're, as you are aware of, in the middle of our own study. What we did is there's a blood test that we obviously, you know about this, where we actually do a little finger prick, and we put some blood on this little thing.
Filter paper.
What he said, right, filter paper, and then we send this blood test off. This blood test will then give us a relatively accurate, very accurate, probably a similar way you tested all those people, I don't know, but this gives us an opportunity to see when patients at Beacon Recovery, when they first come in, we give them the blood test. We then see their levels of differences between the 6s and the 3s. That's the baseline. Then I think we have said, you said 90 days would probably be a decent, and by the way, this is 90 days of taking the omega-3s every single day, making sure that it's in their bloodstream, it's moreover in their brain. Then we do another test. Now, the interesting thing that we're finding at Beacon Recovery, and although we are going to do those follow-up tests with everyone that started, we don't need to wait. I already have the results of taking the omega-3s. When I say the results, they're happy.
Right.
And oftentimes it happens literally within minutes. Yeah. And we're seeing this repeatedly. Yeah. People are now that were in fact skeptical, because we did experience some skepticism from some of these folks. Look, what's it going to hurt? I'm not going to charge you for these things. Just give it a go.
Right.
And they have, and now they are lining up to get their stuff, because we're doing the omegas, but we're also doing the amino acids.
Right.
We're casting a relatively wide net.
Well, this is appropriate in a treatment intervention program. You're giving a combined package.
Yeah.
Largely intent on restoring the brain nutrients that have been depleted, that is, restoring omega-3 fatty acids and restoring amino acids. And we know that those brain nutrients get depleted with chronic and heavy drinking, especially. In our studies we conducted with rhesus monkeys, where we could absolutely control their diet and control their alcohol consumption, after 5 years, the omega-3 fatty acids in the brain were depleted by half, 50%. And this is an important observation, and I want to get back to some of the basics, an important observation because our brains are made of fats. That is the basic substance of our brain. Inside the skull, it's mostly fats, with a few little proteins and a few little neurotransmitters going along, and a heck of a complex and beautiful, electrical song and connection. But the song that's going on is made from neurons, and the neurons are made of lipids and fats. This is critical for what we're talking about, because 20% of the brain in its physical structure is made from primarily DHA, docosahexaenoic acid, and that fatty acid,
say it again.
docosahexaenoic acid, DHA, and that's particularly important because our bodies can't make it. We have to get the DHA directly from our diet.
Now hold on a sec. This thing, DHA, that thing, it's essential.
And what essential means is two things. Essential means that our bodies can't make it on its own, de novo, from carbon and fiber. We have to get the DHA or the precursors of the DHA from our diet. Ultimately, only the plants make the omega-3 fatty acids and the omega-6 fatty acids. And fish are concentrated with omega-3 fatty acids because marine plants and marine biolife are concentrate the omega-3 fatty acids, and the fish then eat. And this is really important also because our nervous systems, millions of years ago, evolved from fish. And the only way that they could evolve a nervous system is because that omega-3 fatty acid was physically present. And it makes up, actually, you know, where the neurons communicate to each other, the synapse, you know, where some neurotransmitters are released and it has a receptor. That synaptic membrane has to have an exquisite biophysics. Kind of like if you think about running your car on the wrong oil, you know, running it on 10W30 when you should be having 10W40, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's only the lubrication. This is the physical properties of the synapses, and they must be made of DHA, or they don't work properly. So it's pretty phenomenal that alcohol can deplete these omega-3 fatty acids from the brain by half. So that means and it gets replaced by the omega-6 fatty acids from junk food.
Well, I mean,
Cheetos, right?
Yes.
So the combination of using a lot of alcohol, depleting the omega-3 fatty acids, and replacing them with the omega-6 fatty acids basically makes a brain that doesn't work right. So if you have a brain that doesn't work right, you know, how can you engage in psychotherapy? How can you engage in exploring your emotions? How can you do this when the basic machinery isn't working right?
I think it was this morning, you were sharing with me a conversation that you had with someone it really, when you said this to me, it, like the person you shared it with, it struck them and it struck me. And I will never forget this, because when we're talking about nutrition, when I say the word nutrition, right, to you, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you're talking about nutrition, right? And I think this is very common, because when I say to you nutrition, whoever you are, the first thing that I thought of was nutrition, right? Below, down here in my gut, right? That's what we all think of.
Heart disease,
yeah.
Cancer.
Well, I mean, nutrition. I go to the gym, I eat right foods. Everybody knows that when you go to the gym, you're spinning your wheels if you don't eat the right foods. Nutrition for our bodies. It's important. Not going to say, because it is. Nutrition for our bodies is vital. However, I'm going to suggest to you, and I know you're not going to argue with me because you're the one that said it, can we say that it's equally, if not more important, to get nutrition up in your brain? Because once again, do we talk about feeding the proper nutrients for the brain? I know what you're thinking, because you're like, aha, I never thought of that, because I had never thought of that. We must provide the adequate and proper nutritions for inside of our brains just as much as we do our bodies.
Absolutely correct.
That's crazy.
So I'm going to reconnect, and the person that I had that conversation with was Secretary Kennedy, or RFK Jr., who was the Secretary of Health and Human Services, and he had an open mental health roundtable to get experts to discuss what might be the causes of the explosion of mental health problems and epidemics, and what might be the solutions. So I described to him that, Secretary Kennedy, you have been absolutely correct in identifying the connection between nutrition and diseases below the neck. However, let me alert you and tell you that we're going to talk about nutrition above the neck. And there are several reasons. One of the most fundamental and basic is that the brain gets 1/3 of every heartbeat. 1/3 of every heartbeat. For the oxygen, for the glucose, the reason you were feeling off by not eating breakfast and lunch had a lot to do with just not having enough glucose circulating in your blood. So the brain had no fuel. So it was starting to not work right. And it's not only the oxygen, it's not only the amount of blood, it's all of the nutrients that are carried by the blood to make this exquisite and beautiful and miraculous organ function correctly. You know, consciousness and emotion must come from our brain. It's the only place it can come from. And if you change the physical properties, like a guitar, if you change the physical properties of a guitar and make it out of plywood, the songs are going to be different.
It's still going to play.
It's still going to play, but it's not going to play the way you want it to play. So that's a fundamental basic issue of not only identifying the right amounts of omega-3s and 6s, but of amino acids, of other nutrients, and we must be humble to really accept that we don't entirely know what the brain needs. But I've spent 30 years of my life examining what are the deficits of omega-3 fatty acids in the brain and their relationship to suicide, to addictions, to depression, to violence, and to neural development. How can you grow a new brain as a kid if you don't have the right nutrition for the brain? Right? If you go to the gym, you want to work out and grow bigger muscles, you put more protein in your diet. Well, how do we apply that question to developing brains? Not only how do you exercise them, that is, go to school and learn things, but what substances need to go into the brain so the new neurons can grow and all the synapses and wires can grow and be stimulated by the learning and by the emotion? That's the big question that I've been working at. And one of the reasons I'm here happy to talk with you is I've done a lot of years of work on the science. And in many ways, it's been left on the science shelves of the library. And we need to get this information out into the grocery store shelves, and we need people to apply it. So as far as I know, you are, there may be one other company or entrepreneur who is using dietary interventions in addictions and mental health, but you're certainly a pioneer in this, and you're a pioneer in implementing and actually doing what the science tells us we should do. And you are, like a good clinician, observing that there's a heck of a whopping response to restoring nutrition of the brain.
I shared with you last night one of our recent graduates. Obviously, I'm not going to share his name, but he's had some massive problems up here. Attempted suicide. That attempt cost him one of his limbs.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Telling me, yes.
And so we had to kick him out. not only of our sober living, but we had to kick him out of our treatment program.
Because he was being disruptive.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And couldn't settle himself down.
Nope.
And couldn't follow any rules. And was
having
very unhappy,
outbursts. I mean,
even though he was seeking help.
Yes. Yes, he was. And he was sober. He was clean. Usually when somebody gets removed from our program, it's because they won't stop using whatever drug or this kid, we had to remove him because of his anger issues, massive problems. Now, when we removed him with heavy hearts, this is not our objective, right? That was part of his humbling experience. But when he came back and came into my office and he basically begged me, so I said, listen, we have just started using these things, the amino acids, the omega-3s. Mm-hmm. And I said, we'll take you back, but you got to try this. Just give it a go. And that's what I tell people. What's the worst that could happen? You could be right where you are right now upon taking these things, and you haven't lost anything. However, what if? And so he, of course, agreed. Didn't have.
And what happened?
And I asked him.
What was his change like? Was he still angry?
No.
Was he still irritable?
It was.
Was he still resistant to participating in treatment?
No, it was miraculous. It was a miracle. And many people. He recently graduated, has his own apartment, which he's never had in his entire life. And at his graduation ceremony, many of his peers conveyed openly that when you got kicked out, sir, I was happy to see you leave.
So disruptive?
Yes. Yeah. So the results were a different human being. And I'm going to suggest to you, the results were we got to see we got to see him, because the person he was before with his imbalances in his brain, that's not who he was. That was, the manifestation of whatever the imbalances were that were in his brain. Yeah. I'm going to suggest to you that when he got his balance back, that's who he is. And he's a delightful human being. Yeah. He was in my office 2 days ago. He lost his job. Now, here's one for you. Okay. He lost his job.
Which would normally just set him off.
Send him into a tailspin, right? No, sir. It's going to be okay. So now, because he's got a balance in his brain, right, he then gets to make different choices.
Right.
He then gets ultimately different outcomes.
Right.
And that's what we're looking for. So you ask, and by the way, I'm not just a hair club, president. I'm also a member. I'm taking these things. I'm taking the amino acids and the omegas with regularity. And I don't see a world in which those things will ever stop happening for me.
Right.
And so I want to go back to this notion, this absolute fact that most of us don't think about.
Right.
We don't.
That nutrition affects. Nutrition impacts above the neck.
Yes.
And especially in addictions. When you describe that he had been sober.
Yeah.
And usually that helps for most people.
Yeah.
But the issue is that the prolonged substance use depleted his brain of critical nutrients.
Yeah.
So when you stop drinking or stop using, that's great, but your brain's still empty of the critical nutrients that it needs, even after you stop drinking. It's not a miraculous religious change, not drinking. No. We know that the omega-3 fatty acids quiet depression. We know that they have an impact on reducing suicide. So let's step back and look at some of the data on aggression and homicide. Okay? So one of the things I did was to get the data on how much fish was consumed in 63 countries, and then what was the rate of homicide death in each of those countries. And that's a pretty hard psychiatric diagnosis, right? It's not, did you have mood problems, or are you a little bit anxious, or, is depression diagnosed differently in every country? No. The person died from violence, from stabbing, from shooting, and that was caused by an aggressive and violent person. And even, I'm a psychiatrist, so I joke that even a psychiatrist can diagnose a homicide death. And that's a good way to calculate the effects of no fish consumption on increasing risk of homicide. So what was shocking is comparing the countries with the highest levels of omega-3s, Japan, Korea, Portugal, other places, to the lowest levels of omega-3s, the increased risk of homicide death was 65-fold. Not double, not triple, not times 10, times 65 greater risk of homicide death. And as the diets, that's just looking across countries by fish consumption, I then looked at the omega-6 question, because the omega-6s push out the omega-3s, and looked at the change of omega-6 fatty acids over time in 6 different countries. And son of a gun, if the increase in omega-6 fatty acids were correlated with the increased risk of homicide death across each of those 6 different countries.
That sounds like a whammy to me. If I understood what you just said, the depletion of threes, the increase of these
Correct.
problematic behaviors,
right?
But then, that's not bad enough, the increases in the 6 also increased in problematic behaviors.
Correct.
What we're experiencing
was correlated.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So the objective then, I would think, I'm not a doctor, I don't play one on TV, you in fact are a doctor, we can suggest that if we can get the 6s down and the 3s up, now we're thinking that, I think, 20 to 1, 10 to 1, whatever it is. Oh, a question for you. Did you find, I don't know if this is even a thing, the higher the 6s and the lower the 3s, the greater the risk of these problems?
Well, we didn't have blood data or specific data correlating these nutrient intakes and risk of homicide, but we did something better, right? All of this predicts that raising the omega-3 fatty acids would reduce either homicide or aggression. So obviously the thing to do is do at least one clinical trial where you give some group a placebo and the other group an omega-3 fatty acid, and son of a gun, if it doesn't help reduce aggression in the group getting the omega-3s, but then we take this to another level, not only one double-blind placebo-controlled trial, but a group of double-blind trials. I believe 32, my colleague Adrian Rain, combined the data from 32 different clinical trials with placebos. And it's called, the technique's called a meta-analysis, and averaged the effects, and taking the omega-3 fatty acids reduced aggression by about 1/3 in the trials. So we have specific data that just changing one molecule can reduce aggression, the omega-3 fatty acids. So when we take that data and think about the population as a whole, I would say that the vast majority of the U.S. population is deficient in omega-3 fatty acids by whatever parameter of deficiency you ask. More than 50% of all calories consumed in the U.S. are from ultra-processed or junk foods. More than 50%. So it's more than 50% of the brains that are deficient in nutrients. Gee, I wonder if that explains the high prevalence of aggression and violence. One example of this, Lynn Todman, who is a public health expert and planner and urban planner, told me that she was talking to some guys on the south side of Chicago. I went to school on the south side of Chicago. There's a lot of areas there that we'll just say they're pretty tough, right? So she asked the first guy, collecting data, well, how come there's so much aggression and violence and troublesome behavior down here on the south side? He says, oh man, we're hungry. You don't get anything to eat. If you ain't getting anything to eat, you'll do anything to get something to eat. Hungry. And the older guy said, nope, that's not it. Our food is making us crazy. Because if you do want something to eat, it's coming from, the snack shop or the 7-Eleven or, whoever. You're living on what? Chips? What did you call them? The cream puffs or? Cheese puffs. Yeah, so we have data now that yes, eating cheese puffs constantly will change your brain and will make you more aggressive and more violent. And the reason that this is absolutely critical to understand on a public health level is this is something we can change.
So, it's so simple.
It's so simple.
Really?
It really is.
So simple.
Getting from here to there is not simple.
So I asked you,
but that's the goal. We can do this.
But so now I asked you earlier, which by the way I was a little surprised, but you told me. The ultimate goal I think would be a 6-to-3 ratio of 1-to-1.
I think so.
That's not
in my opinion.
That's not out of the realm of possibilities.
No, it's the as best as we can estimate what humans beings were eating as ancestral diets centuries, if not millions of years before present.
Did you say Mediterranean diet earlier?
And secondly, we know that one of the healthiest diets in the world is Mediterranean diet, where they don't use seed oils, they don't use soybean oil. Olive oil, which doesn't have 3s or 6s in it, is the primary oil. And the ratio there of the long-chain bioactive fatty acids is about 1-to-1, omega-6s to omega-3s.
So I asked you, because we give the omega-3s away to our patients and to my staff, but we can do this without taking any omega-3s with our diet. Now, I think it makes things easier to achieve the balance that we're looking for, right? But we can still do it with our diets, correct?
Correct.
I'm thinking that's just by eating a ton of fish.
You can do it that way.
Also, you said something earlier in reference to the soybean scenario, and this goes back to the soils being depleted, correct? Right. So it just comes to really paying attention to what we're putting down our pie holes.
Right, exactly.
Really.
So one of the critical observations published by Tanya Blah's blog, now 11, part of my group at the NIH, was she headed the team and got the data for 987 different foods. How much of each of those foods in the U.S. was consumed in 1909 all the way up to 1999, every year. 987 different foods, and then calculated out the nutrient content of all the foods. So I can tell you how much vitamin C was consumed in 1929 in the U.S. And we could predict all that and know the omega-6 consumption and know the sources.
Yeah.
And the most striking thing to me in that data was that 1909, 100 years ago, 0% of calories came from soybean oil. None. And that is true not only from 1909, but a century before that, a century before that, thousands of years, millions of years before that, because it simply doesn't exist in natural and ancestral diets. So soybean oil 1909, 0% of calories. Soybean oil 1999, 20% of all calories consumed in the U.S. and the most prominent caloric content of ultra-processed and junk foods. 20%. So we have an obligation to really assess whether that change in soybean oil is safe and effective not only for the brain but also for the heart. There's a big debate going on in science because polyunsaturated fatty acids are associated with lowering cholesterol and potentially lowering cardiovascular disease. It's a big debate, and I'm not going to get into that now, but we each have our different opinions, and my colleagues did a meta-analysis of the randomized placebo-controlled trials that actually did an intervention and replaced saturated fat with corn oil, or replaced saturated fat with soybean oil. In those randomized trials, we found that yes, the cholesterol went down, but the risk of death went up. So we feel that when you do the careful causal test of testing the molecule, polyunsaturates from soybeans to saturate fatty acids, the risk in our hands was greater when the soybean oil and other seed oils were used. But you're talking about 20% of all the calories consumed. I think we have a moral obligation to really determine whether that's safe or not. In my opinion, there is no data for psychiatric illnesses that those omega-6 seed oils are beneficial or helpful. All the data I see is that they're detrimental to mental health.
And the correlation that you're suggesting, if I'm understanding you correctly, that the elevated sixes, right, are largely responsible for a lot of mental health issues. But can we also say that the elevated sixes and the depleted threes play a huge factor in that as well?
Yes. So let me get a little bit nerdy, but I'm going to give you a simple lesson in biochemistry. Okay? So, in both the omega-3s and the omega-6s, there's the short-chain fatty acids from plants. Okay? And these are 18 carbons long from plant sources. Omega-3s from leaves, omega-6s largely from seeds. So this 18 carbon fatty acid can come from the plants, and our bodies can take those 18 carbon fatty acids and make them longer, from 18 to 20 carbons, and from 20 carbons to 22 carbons, right? So there's one enzyme that makes them longer and also makes them unsaturated. And that enzyme is necessary to convert the short-chain omega-3s from plants to the long-chain omega-3 fatty acids in seafood. We can do that conversion, except if you eat a lot of omega-6 fatty acids. And when you're eating 20-to-1 omega-6 fatty acids to omega-3s, you block or impair that conversion. The same enzyme is used to convert the 18-carbon omega-3s and the 18-carbon omega-6s. The same enzyme. So Bill Harris and others talk about the importance of having high blood levels of omega-3s. Omega-3 index of 8, optimal. Omega-3 index of 1, very bad. There are studies showing, studies of tube feeding people, so you know exactly what they're taking in, and when you lower the single variable of the omega-6 fatty acids, you can boost the level of the omega-3s and the omega-3 index from 1 to 8, not by eating any more fish, simply by backing off the omega-6 fatty acids in the diet. Simply by backing off the omega-6s, you don't have that competition. You get elevated levels of these seafood-based omega-3 fatty acids, which make up your brain and critically control your immune system.
So the sixes, like you said, I think, are a block.
The sixes are a block. They inhibit the conversion from the 18 carbon fatty acids, which are found in plants, to the 20 and 22 carbon fatty acids found in seeds, found in the brain, found in the retina, found in ovaries, found in a huge number of functions. And this is also important not only for the composition of the brain, but it's also critically important for the immune system. The omega-3 fatty acids, both the DHA and another one, 20 carbons EPA, they are absolutely well known, and it's unequivocal that they dampen inflammation. They dampen inflammation. So this is fundamental because whatever disease you have and whatever illness you have, inflammation is like pouring gasoline on the fire, and it explodes everything.
Can we not also suggest that processed foods increase the inflammation all throughout the body?
Well, guess what their major calorie is from?
Sugar?
Soybean oil. Making up 20% of all the calories consumed in the U.S. and a very large composition of the ultra-processed junk foods. So the way I put it simply is junk foods create junk brains, create junk minds, create junk behaviors, create junk communities, and because of their role in neural development, create junk generations. This is pretty serious stuff we're talking about here.
You know, it is, and I was telling you this earlier this morning, it kind of pisses me off that, you know, we're not hearing more about this.
Well, you know, I've been trying to crack the nut for more than 30 years and get the right scientific data. And, you know, I've been a good, diligent scientist, and I primarily talk to my other scientific colleagues, and sometimes the press has amplified what I've had to say, but I'm in the stage of my life now to implement the scientific findings. So we enrolled about 100 patients who had at least 10 years of heavy drinking, you know, like, a quart a day or 2 quarts a day for 10 years, and a strong history of violence and aggression. I mean, I can't imagine doing that. They call 2 quarts a handle. You know, how many handles a day do you drink?
We're talking about liquor.
We're talking about hard liquor.
Yeah.
We're talking about, you know, like sometimes a gallon of whiskey or rum or vodka a day, whatever's cheap. And these people were desperate for help and desperate to stop, had tried every treatment possible, multiple AA groups, psychotherapy, whatever they could do.
Yeah.
And one of the people really crystallized the experience for me and actually allowed himself to be interviewed by a reporter and was on the front page of the Washington Post. And he said to me basically the following story. Doc, I don't know what the heck you're giving me. I don't know what's going on here. I've been trying to stop drinking for decades, and I don't want to drink anymore. And the best example is that, I got sober, so I did this strange thing. I started cleaning up my apartment, cleaning up my house, and I'm cleaning up under the sink, and I find a bottle of wine. So I'm an alcoholic. I uncorked it, poured myself a glass, drank the glass, and then the weirdest thing happened to me, Doc. I poured the rest of the bottle down the drain.
Unheard of in his world.
Unheard of in his world. Come on. I'm an alcoholic. We never waste booze, no matter how bad it is.
That's alcohol abuse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I sometimes prefer the older term of alcohol dependence instead of alcohol use disorder, which can be a little mild or can be 2 handles a day. But this was his experience.
Yeah.
And he stuck with it, and I heard that same experience from many other alcoholics.
And what was what was the reason? Was he taking the omega?
He was taking the omega-3s. This was a randomized placebo-controlled trial of omega-3 fatty acids compared to a placebo.
Yeah.
Only 2 grams of these fish-based omega-3s a day. Only 2. I've done other calculations, and I think a better therapeutic dose is about 4 grams of the fish oil-based omega-3s.
It's very interesting because I'm not. I was telling you that I don't know how I graduated from high school. Really, remember a C is a cause for celebration, and so what I do is pray for direction and clarity. Mm-hmm. What do you got? Who would you want me to talk to?
Right.
And so these things come to me, and then I get the opportunity to recognize if they are truths or if they aren't truths, right? And I recognize from personal experience that what we're talking about here does make a difference. It makes a difference, and it has made a difference with me personally, right? But moreover, and for me more importantly, it has been making a difference with these people. So here, briefly, here's what happens. Somebody, whether it's alcohol, which by the way is more dangerous than the other ones. People don't recognize, because I can go to the liquor store, how dangerous alcohol is.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, you can detox from heroin and you'll wish you were dead, but it very oftentimes won't kill you.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Seriously. Same thing with the blues, the fentanyl, okay? But if you don't detox from alcohol properly, depending on that quarter day you've been drinking for the past 10 years, that will, in fact, oftentimes kill you.
Right.
But my problem
if
is...
the liver disease or heart disease or brain disease doesn't kill you first.
It will.
If your partner who you pissed off doesn't kill you first.
Yes. But when somebody stops taking heroin or the fentanyl for a period of time, and then whatever happens, right? And then they use again. Oftentimes it kills them.
Yeah.
Right? This is and everybody thinks, well, I've heard this, they deserve to die. Shut the up. They don't. But my problem isn't so much...
You see, implicit in that is they deserve to die because they made bad choices. And the issue is that if you're deficient in brain critical nutrients and your emotions are whacked out of control,
yes,
and then your frontal cortex that makes logical decisions doesn't connect to your emotions very well and doesn't work, then it's not a matter of will, and it's a matter that your brain isn't working and you can't make logical decisions, and you get driven by the emotional part of the brain, and especially get driven by the reward.
That's right.
The dopaminergic reward system, why people take cocaine.
Yep.
Amplifies the dopamine. It's a reward, so you pair the cocaine with with feeling good and feeling a reward because of the dopamine system. You drink. Same with alcohol.
Yeah.
It goes through this reward system, and you pair. This is why people advertise alcohol for their specific brands, right? You pair that brand with how you feel in the taste and how you feel in your brain afterwards.
That's right.
You get to recognize this brand. Oh, Captain Morgan, this mythical pirate, I'm drinking rum and feeling like Captain Morgan. And so that pairing is important.
Well, it is. But it's not the person. I care about these people that are in my facility.
That's great.
But I care more about their children.
Yes.
That's it. Yes. Because those children, I was raised by an alcoholic. I was that kid. We see what my dad did, and then we become that person. I did become my dad, right? And
because that's all your brain knew.
That's right.
When it was getting formed.
It's just a never-ending repeated cycle. It's just a revolving door. So the goal here, and when somebody's doing the heroin thing, they then something happens and they relapse, they die. And when they die, it's not just their death, it kills the family, and it causes their children oftentimes to do the same thing. And so I didn't come to these things, the omegas, the aminos, the neurofeedback, the ketamine, all these things that work directly with the brain, because I'm any kind of a brilliant person, because I'm not. And I tell people this when people tell me, "Oh my gosh!"
Intuitively, you know what to do because you've tried a bunch of stuff, and you're a careful observer of people's emotions and people's activities. And you stick with what's right.
This is true, but I'm also obedient. I do what I'm told to do. Somebody comes to me, like say Mike Lewis, and he starts talking when I go to this amino acid conference up in Ohio a couple months ago, and I'm listening to him up there talk about something that who hasn't heard about omega-3s, but he's giving a description the way you are, and I'm recognizing truth. I need to talk to this guy, which has led me to where I am with you right now, right?
Thank you. Yeah.
And so, in closing, we will say that together, right, all of us, like-minded individuals, you've been doing this for 30 years, right? Like-minded individuals like ourselves, if there's anybody else out there that wants to join, right, us,
right,
to talk about these things, to have conversations about these things, it's important that we recognize that we can provide nutrients for our brains. And when we do this, provide proper nutrients for our brains, the same way when we provide nutrients for our bodies, we can achieve phenomenal
things.
Yeah.
So I wanted to tell you one more story.
Okay.
With regards to prayer and with regards to saying you do as you're told.
Yeah.
And, I have the license to do this because I'm a psychiatrist.
Oh.
Right. And symbols and meaning. Well, I told you about, how alcohol, the symbol of Captain Morgan gets paired to the alcohol, gets paired to the behavior. Sometimes those pairings are unconscious. You're not aware of the symbolic connection.
Yeah.
So to Captain Morgan, I associated somehow feeling better. So I had the following thought experiment. I was driving in Rockville, Maryland, and on the car in front of me, I saw the Christian symbol of fish with the word peace in it. I said, now why the heck is that paired? So, if there's an unconscious pairing between the greatest delivery source of omega-3 fatty acids, fish, and a reduction of violence, is it possible that the symbol of Christ instructing us to be more peaceful and less violent. It's not a random pairing to fish. There is both a physical, spiritual, and religious connection. So the symbol of Christ was the fish, probably 800 years before the crucifix became the symbol of Christ. And we know from these data that you eat more fish or omega-3s, you become less violent, less aggressive, and more happy.
More Christ-like.
More Christ-like. You literally become more Christ-like. To the extent that in 1242 to 1246, the First Vatican, Vatican I, made actually the first dietary recommendations in the world. Fish on Wednesdays, fish on Fridays, fish on Christian feast days. So I'm a scientist. I calculated it all out and added it up. And it's about 2 or 3 grams of omega-3 fatty acids a day, which are effective doses when we give them in randomized placebo-controlled trials. And furthermore, although it's not as prominent necessarily in other religions, the symbolism is still there. You remember the black and white fish, the black and white yin and yang symbol?
Yeah.
You know what it's called?
I do not.
The fish symbol. And Kuan Yin in Chinese religions and in Persian religions, eating fish is associated with more peaceful, less violent, healthier behaviors for humanity. So you get the combination of the fish plus the teachings plus the community. We have a better world. And there are no positive associations between cheese puffs and religion and less violence.
You know, my cheese puffs. Yeah. Well, look, you know, I'm grateful that you've invited me to your home. You know, from Utah to where we are now, which is, he lives in a very stunning environment. I'm grateful. I'm grateful that you invited me here. I'm grateful that we have this friendship because you're stuck with me. You do know that.
Yeah, I know that.
And I'm going to do my part of rolling up my sleeves, being in the trenches and implementing. And I had no idea that I was going to be. I didn't know that I was implementing your scientific findings, putting what you've found together in a scientific setting. These things, from a scientist's perspective, I know are true. I didn't know that I was going to take your data, your data, and implement them in real time. I was just doing what I was told. There are no coincidences, my friend. There's no coincidences that we are, in fact, fighting the good fight. There's a reason we're doing this. And the reason is because you, sir, myself, Mike Lewis, and people like us, we care.
We care
about the fellow inhabitants of our world. We are not God. He doesn't ask me to love one another. He doesn't say, as I have loved thee, love one another. It's not a request. And when he's saying that, he's not talking about loving my wife or my child. He's talking about loving my fellow inhabitants.
Right.
And if we, or when we, which is what we are doing, introducing a fundamental, as simple as it can be, truth, it's so easy.
You can love your other inhabitants of this earth a lot easier with good brain nutrition than in cheese puffs. You know,
or alcohol, or fentanyl, or heroin, right? Or meth.
Right.
You know, these things, in my opinion, are the exact opposite of good. They're the opposite of God. Yeah, introduced to bring misery.
Right.
Right.
I had a couple of notes I wanted to touch base on, and one of them is that it's well documented that after tobacco advertising was banned from TV and billboards, the CEOs then went to General Mills and went to food companies and bought and became leaders of the food companies and did the scientific testing as to how to make foods addictive, because they had learned that that's a heck of a good way to make money.
Yeah.
And they had no financial responsibility for the medical chaos caused by alcohol, and they have no financial responsibility for the mental health and other medical illnesses caused by these dietary changes, which they deliberately did to make foods addictive, to make profits for themselves, and they disavow every moral responsibility to clean up their mess.
Well, processed foods are evil.
Well, if we define evil as messing up people's brains so that they become violent and aggressive and can't think well, that's a definition. I have to agree with that.
Yeah.
And as I've said, we have a moral duty.
Yeah, we do.
We have a moral duty to fix this, and that's why I spent 30 years in the United States Public Health Service wearing a uniform and recognizing my duty.
Good for you.
And I'm going to continue it. And
with me by your side.
Looking forward to working with Health and Human Services, and looking forward to working with Secretary Kennedy in doing this. There was a prior program called the Food and Mood Program, which I believe is still active, which intends to fix the foods of all school children across the U.S. and put the right brain critical nutrients in them to reduce aggression and reduce depression among school children, based on the data by this guy, what's his name? Oh, that's right, Hebblin. So I want to see that implemented. So
here's where we're going to end with the Hebblin guy. I recently had one of the owners from one of the supplemental companies, a company called Hardee's. They make really good multivitamins, whatnot. So he was in my office, one of the owners of this company, and he happened to see some omega-3s sitting on my desk, and he started going off about some guy that he was saying was his words, not mine, the world's most authority on omega-3s. Now, in my mind, I'm thinking, I don't know who you're talking about, right? But I know, in my opinion, who it is. So he's saying all these things. He listened to this guy speak. The guy was a keynote speaker at wherever he was. There was a lot of people in the room, and he was in that line of people to go shake that man's hand, because he didn't spend a lot of time with this guy, but he was very impressed, and he recognized that this guy was like the guy. So I listened eagerly to be able to share with him that your guy isn't, my guy is. And he finished, and I'm like, well, what's this guy's name? He said, Joe Hebblin. And this was last week, and I said, oh, so I'm doing a podcast with him in his home, right?
So
grateful.
Thank you very much for that kind compliment. My view is that this field of omega-3 fatty acids has hundreds of excellent and brilliant people in it, and I would in no way say that I'm the foremost expert in all of omega-3s. I would say that I'm the foundational pioneer of omega-3s in mental health issues, in depression, in suicide, in violence, in child neural development that we haven't even really touched on, and those other issues. But I want to be clear and respectful to my field and my other brilliant colleagues.
Okay.
But thank you for the compliment.
He said it. I didn't argue.
I'm arguing.
Well, I can tell you that out of all the people that I know personally, you are the most knowledgeable. So that is a true statement. So grateful, right?
The important part is not how our egos are stroked. The important issue is what we do
for our brothers
My
and sisters.
grandmother always said there's a big difference between promise and do. And in my career, I've spent 30 years developing the science and making the promise.
Yeah.
And now it's even more important that we do this literally, I believe, for the sake of our species.
Humanity.
Of humanity.
Hear, hear. Thank you, my friend. This has been the latest edition of the Beacon of Light podcast. And until we see you again, thank you. And Joe, so grateful for your time.
I'm very grateful for this interview.